Howdy folks, Craig here. This episode we have James Doxey revealing all of his secrets on how he plays the Arcanist Master Kaeris and her wildfire crew. He also exposes how to effectively play against her. But before we jump into the episode, our friends at Gadzooks Gaming have a sweet offer for all of our US and Canadian listeners. Gadzooks Gaming has always been a big supporter of the Third Floor, Malifaux, and a ton of other games like Wild West Exodus, Dark Age, Frostgrave, Legion. What makes them my favorite online retailer is not only the customer service, but the wicked custom terrain and accessories that they sell. They're giving all of our North American listeners free shipping if you spend $100 or more and enter in the promo code Third Floor. That's spelled out one word, THIRDFLOOR. Check them out at gadzooksgaming.com. Use the promo code Third Floor, and the details are in the show notes. Now on to the episode. I think it's cool that even though you're a competitive player, that it's really the fluff that's kind of set its hook inside of you and has kept you on a certain faction. That's very cool.
One of the traps I think with Kaeris is spending a lot of energy moving pyre markers. She has a one action to do it. A lot of Kaeris is positioning, understanding when you need to be in a pyre, when you don't want to be in a pyre.
I see Kaeris on the other side of the table. What are some things that are going to help me? Can you give me a sense of what she's afraid of? Obviously, there's two core models, right? It was her and her totem. But beyond that, are there models that just always make every list, regardless of what faction is declared by your opponent or what the pool is?
Whenever I hire anything, you're looking for, is this scoring me points or is it denying your opponent's points? Yep. Which includes killing their stuff. Every time I take the fire starter, I seem to regret it, and that could well be me.
There are few things better than stepping away from the screens, unplugging and sitting around a table to do battle with your friends. Every week, Third Floor Wars brings you the latest strategies, tactics, and reviews on board games, card games, and miniature games like Malifaux. If you want useful information on the games you already play, or new insights on great games other people are playing, you are in the right place. Craig and Ray welcome you to the Third Floor and the Tabletop Talk broadcast.
Craig here on the Third Floor. Today we're going to do a deep dive into the Arcanist Master Kaeris and how she and the Wildfire crew work in Malifaux 3rd Edition. My guest today is James Doxey. He's an accomplished Arcanist player coming out of the UK, and James has been on the show before, and we are excited to have him back. So, James, welcome back to the Third Floor. To start off, can you tell us how you ended up becoming an Arcanist player?
Oh, I think that's an interesting question, and thank you for having me back. I think they were the faction I gravitated to in 1st edition. So I think we spoke last time about how I played in 1st edition, and when I picked up Malifaux for the first time, I'd had a few weird miniatures in, I think, sort of in an undead Warhammer Fantasy army years ago. But when Malifaux first came out and I was sort of picking up, I think I grabbed sort of the two crews I like the look of. I think that was a Nicodem crew and a Rasputina crew. And it just so happened that my mate wanted to play Nicodem, and that left me with Rasputina. And so the rest is history.
Do you think that there's, stylistically, there's something about Arcanists that has kept you with them for so long, or?
I kind of like the kind of the rogue magic user and the sort of the seeker of truth sort of aspect of Arcanists. And, we've talked before about my love of steam-powered mechanical robots. So aesthetically, there's that going on. There's this kind of the individualistic, sort of the talent of the individual over kind of the oppressive homogeny of the guild. I kind of like, and it kind of speaks about sort of the mastery of an art. A lot of Arcanism, sort of the way sort of the mastery of a specific art, and I kind of like that element. So I suppose all of those things drew me to it, as well as there's something of the investigators in a Lovecraft tale about the Arcanists, sort of there's sort of that aspect of it speaks to me as well.
I think it's cool that even though you're a competitive player, that it's really the fluff that's kind of set its hook inside of you and has kept you on a certain faction. That's very cool. So, all right. So the reason we're here is we're going to really kind of deep dive into Kaeris. You and I have talked offline, and you've said that she's always been one of your first loves. And of course, in 2E, she struggled. But we're seeing her come back here in 3E, and I know you've been getting a ton of games in with her, and I asked you to do a deep dive with me, and this was the one you picked. So we're going to really talk about, the Wildfire crew in general, not just Kaeris, and kind of how do they play on the table? How do you build a Wildfire crew? What your thought process is, James, getting, for a path to victory, and how many adjustments you make to the opponent, the schemes and strategy pool and things like that. So probably to get us started, James, can you give us a bit of an overview on Kaeris herself?
Yeah, certainly. So Kaeris herself and her crew, certainly, I think of them as sort of fast skirmishers. So they've sort of got a kind of a run and gun style, and they're sort of harassing the opponent into sort of putting them under pressure so that they stall, and then sort of running and completing their objectives. Having sort of stumbled their opponent. That tends to be the way I play them and the way I see them working best. So that's sort of in terms of play style, and then primarily they're focused around the burning condition, which you would expect, and also pyre markers, and sort of the use of sort of projecting that hazardous terrain onto the board.
So I noticed when I look at her car, the entire, marker mechanic, how much does that come into play with her? Is that something that you're going to see a lot of when you're playing Kaeris, or is it a side effect that you use it when you can? How pivotal is it?
It varies strategy to strategy, but broadly it is fairly important. I mean, I have a sort of long-standing opponents who will just occasionally mutter sort of, I don't know, bloody 8 pyre markers. So clearly it's having a psychological effect on my opponents, if nothing else. They are fairly pivotal. You use them in a couple of different ways. And to a certain extent, both with the pyre markers and the burning, what you're trying to do with these is make them a problem for your opponent. So the less energy generally you can spend in managing pyres, and the more you can kind of shunt that onto the opponent, the better you're doing, would be my way of looking at it.
And so how does it, if you're pushing to have the opponent manage them, can you dig into that a little bit deeper for you? Like, what exactly does that mean? You want them to manage the markers?
So what you're trying to do with the markers is force your opponent to react to them. So if an opponent stood in a pyre, not uncommon for them to be able to take 3 actions in a pyre, pick up 3 burning, gain 3 injured. They've then got to worry about, okay, well, I'm activating in a pyre. Do I need to move out of the pyre? Am I prepared to take the 3 burning? What about the injured? And sort of the more you're kind of putting them in a position where they've got a question to answer with the pyre, the better you're doing. So generally getting a pyre where your opponent's going to want to be, making them either spend the AP to walk around it or take the conditions that the pyre will hand out to them, and then manage those conditions off their own models, either by just taking the effects and kind of facing it that way, or taking not interacting actions anymore, assist actions now, to kind of manage those conditions off, or bringing condition removal. Those are all inefficiencies you're forcing onto your opponent, and so that's the way you're trying to get to with the pyres.
So really trying to push them into making suboptimal choices and decisions, things that aren't pushing them towards victory, not towards scoring.
Absolutely, and just sort of giving them more, giving them more to manage, and that kind of that by forcing them onto that inefficient path, or making them make difficult choices, that kind of leaves you freer to act and score yourself. Right.
Now they're 50 millimeters, right?
Yeah, the 50 mil markers, they hand out burning as standard, and to the enemy, they become injured and they're unignorable. So that kind of gets round a number of things that sort of people could do to ignore terrain.
And in a typical game, James, I know it'll vary, but in a typical game, how many pyre markers are going to be there at the end of turn 5?
End of turn 5, again, it'll vary, but I don't think I've quite run out having 8 in my box so far. So sort of somewhere between 6 and 8 ideally, but again, very, very strategy dependent.
Yeah. And it's, I know it's a bonus action for her, right? To create one. Is there other ways that there's pyre markers popping out there other than her bonus?
Yeah, so there's her bonus action, so she drops them. She can drop one on a trigger on a main attack, and you drop it as a blast mark as it goes down in contact with the model that you were originally targeting. Acts as a blast mark, and then becomes a pyre marker on the table. That's really effective. The Fire Girl and the Fire Gamin drop one when they die. And Carlos, in addition, one of her henchmen can create pyre markers as well. So those tend to be the ways that they drop down. The majority of pyre markers will come from Kaeris herself for the duration of the game.
And are they moved at all, or once they're down, they're down?
You can. So one of the traps I think with Kaeris is spending a lot of energy moving pyre markers. She has a one action to do it, or a general tactical action to do it. And her totem can do it, and probably the totem is the most efficient at moving them. You probably do want to move them. It's about efficiency in that. The other thing that can move them is once a turn, Fire Golems and Gamin that are taking a walk actions or a pyre can bring the pyre with them.
Okay.
It's one of these things where there is a slight trap in spending your AP moving pyres and messing about with pyres, and that's again where you want to be on where it's efficient to do it. Where it's not efficient to do it, you just got to watch that, because you can spend a lot of your energy and your AP messing about with pyres and not progressing towards victory.
So, if things are going your way, how on a particular turn, how do you want Kaeris spending her 3 actions?
She only has the one, also the one relevant free action, so she'll generally have a go at making some pyres, which is good. She'll often stand in them herself. You're generally looking to spend her energy attacking. So she has run and gun, so she can charge an attack with her main attack. So generally you're looking to charge in, attack something, probably hit it again, and often you're looking to get out of dodge. So you're quite often sort of skirmishing in and out of the battle line with her. But that run and gun's really effective for sort of charging 6, being able to shoot another 8, target something, and then kind of bounce back out again. And that tends to be how she's trying to spend her turn.
Is there anything in particular you're doing to keep her alive other than positioning?
Positioning is the key. She's defense 5 and armor 1, so she's not the most tanky of masters. Her built-in defensive trigger gives out burning, but again's not really helping her. You don't need a lot of stones for suits in this crew, so you tend to be fairly liberal with your stone use in defense. And the other thing to bear in mind is the burning condition on her. She can spend burning on herself for positive to deal. So quite often you try, pretty much any time someone's coming at her, she'll generally have a good degree of burning on herself, and you're aiming to spend those in defense just to make that much harder for your opponent to get at you.
Gotcha. It's funny. I remember seeing that on the card, and automatically I thought about her attacking, because I think of her as kind of an offensive piece, but I didn't think about that. You could lower that burning and help her defensively and get yourself on positives. So that's cool. That'll also help you get around some conditions too.
Yeah, and it's any deal. So terrifying deals, any kind of deal you can spend it on, which is useful. So it don't even have to be opposed. And the thing to remember with burning stacks after 3. So you take 1 at 1, 2 at 4, and 3 at 7. Because she's armor 1, provided you're at burning 6 or less, she takes one damage a turn from the burning. And the way I look at it is you manage it, you leave the burning on her. You don't try and take no damage from burning. You just accept she's going to be on fire. She's going to take a point of damage a turn and kind of price that in. So yeah, just get her on fire and fairly on fire. And that really helps her get on with life.
Yeah, I guess by the end of the turn, at the end of, via her activation, your ability to spend that burning allows you really to manage that, right?
That's it. And bearing in mind, often, if your opponents are attacking her, there's no problem in spending that burning off as well. So like if they are attacking you can spend the burning down. If they're not attacking you, then, taking a point of damage at the end of turn is not really a problem. Bearing in mind as well, she's often scooping burning up. So she's taking actions inside a pyre. So quite often she'll create a pyre, charge into that pyre, and then just start attacking from it. So she's she's sort of cycling the burning as she uses it anyway. All of that's fairly kind of baked in with her. So there's no problem having her on fire. There's no problem. You just got to accept that she's going to be on fire. Take a point of damage a turn.
Right. And so obviously, putting her into the pyre while she's acting, it picks up burning, because when you take an action inside of a pyre marker, you gain burning. Are you getting burning on her elsewhere through her crew and things like that, or is the pyre markers enough?
That tends to be the way. You generally, the first action on the first turn, or early on the first turn, someone like Carlos will activate the pulse that comes off Carlos when he activates. The same on the fire golem has. Just 2-inch pulse. Everyone gains burning. So you tend to pick up a point or two that way early doors, but after that, you tend to be getting all your burning from pyre markers.
Very, very cool. Now, the first, obviously, you read a card, right? And, you get kind of an idea of, how she works. But after you get maybe 5-10 games of Kaeris, is there something that you kind of discovered about her, maybe by the third or fourth game, something that wasn't real obvious at the beginning?
I think the really taking some time to understand her conflagration attack and how some of the interactions on that work. And really, it is all about conflagration. For me, I think that a lot of the rest of it is a distraction. So the attack's built-in trigger is quite useful. So you take the attack itself does a point of damage, a point of burning to anyone damaged by it, which is great. And you can trade that point of burning effectively on her built-in smaller trigger for +1 damage, but it's damage from the burning condition. So it creates effectively an attack that's 3, 4, 6. Yeah. But because it's 2 sources, that gives you a couple of, and the second source is from the condition, it gives you a couple of useful things. So, for example, leveraging that enabled me to assassinate Jackdaw, because Jackdaw cares about how many times he's taking damage, not how much damage he's taking. Right. So there are some useful times when those sorts of things, and also understanding a lot of Kaeris' positioning, understanding when you need to be in a pyre, when you don't want to be in a pyre, and when to spend your burning for the positive flips are really the sort of key to getting the most out of her. And for a new player picking her up, the thing to do is really spend some time with the rules for hazardous terrain to understand how pyre markers, circumstances under which pyre markers work, how they work, because that it does take a little bit of getting used to, and that's probably where the heavy lift is in terms of learning sort of. That's the only complex rules and interaction in the crew, and it's one you want to invest a little bit of time in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, hazardous terrain is not the most common terrain type that you see on a board. And even in 2E, there's people that, it's easy to get rusty on the rules. Whereas, with her, you're going to use a lot. Both you're going to be going into it, and your opponents hopefully will be going into it. So that makes a ton of sense. All right, that's good. So James, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I want to talk to you a little bit about, how you build a wildfire crew, if you have a core to that crew, and kind of your thought process on that. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Howdy folks, Craig here. Now if you love gadgets as much as we do, you're going to love the new Third Floor Wars Gadget Bundle from Schooner Labs. Branded with the logo of your favorite podcast, it comes with 2 measuring multi-tools, a compass stepper for those tight and important movements, along with a compact dashboard to track your turn, strat, and scheme scoring, along with your soul stones and pass tokens. It is the perfect bundle for anyone who plays Malifaux or just wants to look cool while doing it. The link is in the show notes. Check them out and help support your favorite gaming podcast. Okay, so we've got Kaeris. She's out there. She's creating pyre markers. She's doing some attacks, and James made the point before the break that damage track on that attack is a bit deceptive and pretty unique. I really like, James, what you said about Jackdaw and how you could really leverage Kaeris going into Daw. But let's talk about kind of building a crew. So is there a core? Obviously, there's 2 core models, right? It was her and her totem. But beyond that, are there models that just always make every list, regardless of what faction is declared by your opponent or what the pool is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm fairly I'm almost always working with Kaeris and Totem, as mentioned, a Fire Golem, a Fire Gamin, and Carlos. Those are probably where my core sits. So to kind of take you through how a kind of typical first turn will play out with those core models, because I think that's fairly key to looking at how to get some sort of leverage some value out of the crew. They'll tend to deploy in a fairly tight bunch. One of the great things about this crew is it's got a lot of movement anyway, which means you can afford to bunch a little bit more at the start.
Right.
So Carlos will tend to activate. Pretty much everything will immediately be set on fire by his pulse when he activates. You've then got a bit of a choice. So if your hands, you really want to try and get 2 pyre markers down on the first turn. That tends to be kind of a key objective. Now, Kaeris's built-in pyre generation needs a 5 of anything, and a 5 of mass will get her a second cast at that action. Carlos needs a tome to do his. So you're looking for, and I believe his is a 6 of tome. Someone can correct me on that. So I think what you're aiming to do is you're looking at your hand and figuring out which one of them is going to create the second pyre. Kaeris will always go for the first one. Carlos, it's whether or not Carlos is doing the second one or Kaeris is. And if you can't do either, I'm not above stoning for one. I think that's probably fairly key, is getting them down. So Carlos, if it is Carlos will drop the pyre marker and then move off, and then he's free to go objective run. And Carlos is your expensive kind of mid-range skirmisher on the edge of combat, but looking to do objectives. So his other action, if he's not making a pyre, gives him a 5-inch move and picks up some burning for him, which is useful for him. He's got Don't Mind Me. He's a showgirl, so he's fairly mobile. He can get out of combat. He can interact well in combat. His attack does both burning and distracted on the attack, and so he's really useful. He's got Butterfly Jump, which is one of the best defensive abilities in M3E currently.
Yeah, that's a good ability.
So difficult to pin that guy down, very, very fast across the board. So generally he's moving off in the direction of whichever objectives he's going to go run at. So that leaves you with a pyre marker somewhere generally at least 5 inches in front of the Fire Gamin. Fire Gamin will then go off and it's already got one burning, it'll wander into that pyre marker, gets up and picks up another burning and walk again, caddying that pyre marker further up, and its aim is to wind up at that point with 3 burning on it and a back of its base about 8 inches from the Fire Golem. That now, Fire Gamin, Fire Golems both have sort of 2 common abilities. They can use burning on themselves as armor or as damage reduction. So you can spend up to 2 burning off them to reduce damage down to a minimum of 1. So that makes them relatively tanky for their points. So the Gamin's set up now 8 inches in front of the Golem. Pyre markers sat on the front edge of the Gamin's base because it's allowed to take the pyre with it when it takes that second walk. And so it's set up and ready to go. So the Fire Golem then can activate. If Kaeris is still stood nearby, she'll probably get a point of burning from its pulse. He has the same one as Carlos. When he activates, everyone within 2 gets burning. But what he's able to do is then use his free action on the Fire Golem. Needs a 7. And that allows him to place in base contact with any model that's on fire within 8 inches. That's so incredibly useful because you're going 8 inches forward plus both of your bases. You get a ton of movement off that place. It's useful all the way around generally. So it's good for leaping into combat, out of combat, but on the first turn that sets you up. So you've got that Fire Golem now 10, nearly 11 inches up the board at this point, and it's got 2 general AP left. Also, it's just used its free action. It's just landed in the pyre. So it's free action as well as placing in contact with the model that's on fire. It gets to take up to 3 of their burning from them and put him on himself. And as I've already mentioned, it uses it as armor. So now it's got the one it got from Carlos, the one it got from landing in the pyre on this action, and the 3 off the Fire Golem on it. So it's got 5 points of armor. And it'll get 1 for whichever action it takes next. So you've got a Fire Golem that's reasonably tanked up, and this thing's defense 5, 10 wounds, and now effectively armor 2, and sat, ready to go and ready to go after something. And I will generally aim to try and get that Golem into something on turn 1 to start holding the enemy up. And I tend to use it as a fairly disposable model. It's going to go in, do some damage, hand up some burning, and hold the enemy up. Ideally, hold them up in a pyre, or just generally just set the enemy on fire and cause them to pause coming out of the deployment zone and having to deal with, or early into their sort of getting out of dodge and sort of trying to force them to deal with this fire golem.
Yeah, and with that, with 10 wounds and the up to 2 damage reduction, I would imagine he sticks around for a good bit, so you can get aggressive with him. Is there any healing in the crew?
There is healing available to the crew. I don't tend to take the healing options in the crew. So then there's probably, I think the thing with the fire golem is there's a limit to how much you want to spend keeping it alive. It will, generally it will soak 8 hits from something, and that's enough. Provided you can kind of keep, your defense 5, you should be able to keep them to broadly hitting you on weak or moderate. So, provided they're not hitting you for more than 3, you can drop that down to 1 pretty reliably. His attacks, let him pick up burning as well as give burning to the opponent, so he can kind of replenish that armor at will. And I just tend to let him get chewed through. But the time it takes your opponent, the energy it takes your opponent to chew through him, tends to mean, and his ability to sort of redeploy out of combat by using his free action to get back out of combat, charge something else.
Right.
Means that it's quite difficult for your opponent to manage him not being not attacking the thing they don't want him to attack, and just let your opponent kind of chew at him, and sort of like them waste their energy on dealing with a fire golem while your crew are off scoring.
Yeah, I mean, if he can soak 3 or 4 activations of other models, that's big.
That's it, and that's what you're using him for. You're using him as that speed bump, that kind of battering ram going. Something he will kill something, and when he dies, he'll drop a pyre. So you want it with like everything around him's on fire. It's wasted a load of AP. It's now got to worry about the fact that it's maybe it's certainly taking 1 damage a turn, but probably getting close to taking 2 damage a turn. At which point, that mounts up pretty quickly. So it's not uncommon at the end of turn 3. Models are just dropping dead on your opponent's side from the amount of burning that they've picked up casually. And then that leaves Kaeris free to sort of snipe things that need finishing off or kind of run off and get objectives. And the rest of that crew is then free to move. Your fire gammon is surprisingly tanky because it can pick up more burning, can eat pyre markers to gain burning and heal. So it can run off and do some additional road bump stuff or go do some light scheme itself. It's walk 5, it's regionally survivable. So it can go... it can go off and get going as well. So that's a core of a crew that's 22 stones, and it kind of gives you a lot of flexibility. The piece in there we haven't talked about is the Eternal Flame, and it's easy to miss this guy because he's insignificant, and he's only got 3 wounds, he's armor 2, so he takes a little bit of putting down, but he's not impossible to kill. But the tactical actions on him are incredibly useful. So he's got 2 tactical actions. His free one lets you place a pyre marker within 3 of itself, and that's done at up to 10-inch range. So that's quite good for kind of making sure that pyres are under enemy. So if an enemy's sort of moved out of the pyre or moved away from a pyre, you can just go bam. Okay, now it's back underneath you. You take another round of burning and injured, which is really good. And then it's got flaming detonation, which always throws people because it doesn't destroy the pyre marker. You detonate a pyre marker, but it doesn't destroy the marker. And it's a pulse to enemies within pulse 2 of the pyre marker you target, again at up to 10 inches away. TN13 move duel, and it's 1 damage and 1 burning if they fail. So again, that's kind of draining resources, and the number of opponents that will then, once they've seen an activation of that from the Eternal Flame, her totem, will then make a beeline to try and kill that, which... again, they can do that, but again, it's more AP they're spending that isn't in any way preventing you from scoring.
So it sounds like to me, obviously you've got Kaeris, you've got the totem, and it's pretty much the gammon and the golem that are going to make pretty much every crew, and then you're going to flex the rest.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's where your core is coming from for me, and the rest is all up for grabs.
So, staying within the wildfire keyword, what are some common ones? So not takes every time, but models that you've gotten a lot of good mileage out of and are making the 50 soulstone cut more often than not.
So There aren't loads. I'll be honest. I've been messing around with Elijah Borgman as a secondary hitter. He's quite useful. His challenge is when we talked about sort of Carlos and the Golem and Kaeris, they've all got effectively 3 AP. They've all got an additional move in there somewhere, so that they're able to be fairly effective. Borgman doesn't. He is the only member of the crew that can effectively leverage. Something else having burning. Generally, you're not paying a lot of attention to the enemy's burning value. You're letting them worry about that. But his Immolate allows him to sort of put a load of damage, convert burning up to 5 burning on a model into damage immediately, which means your opponent has to worry about that a lot more. And he's got a very solid attack. He's armed with a great sword, which is always good. What really lets him down is his speed. He generally wants the enemy to come to him a bit more. Which is why he doesn't always make the cut, certainly.
Got it. And how about one of my favorite models, just from a modeling perspective? Does Firestarter get any use?
Every time I take the Firestarter, I seem to regret it, and that could well be me. I think for me, the challenge is at cost 7, he's another objective runner. He's sort of his primary offense is of minimal value. Probably the thing that, because of the reckless, he's generally quite vulnerable. Unless you're kind of managing that fairly carefully. Where he probably is quite useful, light under their feet. His attack action, but it tends to be performed more as a tactical. 8-inch range against movement, and it lets you push models and reduce their burning to push them further. But the trigger on that's quite useful. Draw out their secrets. So if you get a tome, which isn't built in, but he's a henchman, so you can force it, drops a scheme marker in base contact with the target. So what you can do is you can have your fire golem or something else engaged with an enemy, and just ping it in the back. We draw out your secrets. It can relent. If you probably get it that tome trigger, and there's no TN. So if you're doing it to a friendly, you can just, any 2 tomes or a tome and a stone, drop 2 scheme markers in base contact, do that late on. It does give you a detonate the charges, that sort of thing. I think the challenge for Arcanists is we have some great objective runners that are neutral and well-costed, or sort of a well-costed, even paying hiring tax. So that tends to be what keeps the Firestarter out of my lists.
Well, speaking of which, so let's talk about that. What are some versatile and out-of-keyword models that you'll bring in?
So I'm a big fan of Windgammon. So you're paying out of faction, sort of out of keyword, you're paying 7 for a Windgammon. 6-stone model normally, 6 wounds, armor 1. Very nice leap, and movement 6 with flight. So they're very good scheme runners. They'll run into the back corners. They'll go do breakthrough. They'll go do search the ruins. They'll go do power ritual very nicely. So they tend to be a good low cost or mid cost scheme runner for the crew. And combined with Carlos, that tends to give you the objective running you need. I like a Soulstone Miner as presented in the beta. I'm conscious we are at the end of the beta. We are after beta as a lot, but before we've seen final rules. They essentially discount themselves by 2 stones during the game, so you're getting near enough a 6-stone model for 4, which they're very mobile. They tend to be not the greatest objective runner these days. They tend to only get maybe 1 good interact or 2 good interacts in a game, but they are quite useful for picking off models outside or just harassing models that are trying to run objectives. So they tend to do kind of a mixed role. They'll either deploy to do further scheme running if I need some support in objective running, or they'll just deploy to harass the opponent. And they can do work in things like hull up their forces, where they're a cheap model that can appear out of nowhere. You can do there's a few interesting things you can do with those sort of appearing and disappearing.
And how about, and of course isn't released yet, so I would assume you'd have to proxy, but she has a new minion, right? Firebranded? Yeah,
the Firebranded. I mean, I'm disappointed by the Firebranded. So they're 6, and the challenge as a 6 with a Firebranded is I don't know why I'm hiring them. So yeah, whenever I hire anything, you're looking for, is this scoring me points or is it denying your opponent's points, which includes killing their stuff. Its attacks are very ordinary. The only thing it's got that sort of you would look and go, what's my unique selling point? Why am I hiring this? Embrace the Flame. which is a free action range 6 heal. And it's a decent heal. You should be getting, with setup, you should be getting 3 healing on a model with that. But I'm not sure I'm paying 6 soul stones to heal something 3 a turn. If that, it just doesn't feel like a great use of 6 soul stones to me.
Yeah, it's a bonus action, right? So you're only going to be able to do it once per. So that's limiting. I would imagine it'd be a little bit different if it was a tactical, or just a regular action, not a bonus action.
Exactly. And if there was something else there, if there was some condition removal, if there was some other utility that you're going to get from this other than the heal, because you've got to assume on turn 1 you don't need the heal. Healing the fire golem, which is the thing you tend to be aiming to take damage on, or tends to be the thing that's sort of routinely heavily on fire and around things that are on fire to be healed. You're only really trading the thing that it's using as armor for more health. So you're not really getting, it's almost the reverse. When you heal something behind armor, your opponent might have had to put 3 damage in to do 1 damage. So when you heal that 1 back, you heal 3 back, you're healing somewhere up to 9 wounds effective to sort of your opponent to take that back off again. When you heal a fire golem with Embrace the Flame, you're sort of trading its armor off for the healing. So it's almost the net is lower than the sum of the heal. And Kaeris tends to want to be too mobile to then being chased round by a firebranded going, hang on, wait, I want to heal you. It's not that's the thing for me. Now, I'll confess all of this is from a position of theory 5. I've not yet got one on the table, but I don't see anything that's got me in a hurry.
It hasn't inspired you enough to even try it because you can't figure out where he fits. And that talks to the kind of the healing trap that you mentioned in the first segment.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Kaeris crew, you're trying to burn bright and burn quick, right? So your tendency is, stuff you're going to lose your own models. You tend to want to go in. You tend to want to fight. You're not the most tanky of factions. I mean, you are an Arcanist, so you've got options. But actually, if you want to sort of be taking hits, there are better Arcanist crews for that. This is a crew about being mobile, about sort of surgically striking at the enemy, about tripping them up and running, and sort of so that kind of approach of kind of going, well, I'm going to heal and I'm going to sort of stand in the battle line and slog it out. I mean, that's where you want to be Ironsides or Hoffman. That's where you want to be one of those rather than sort of this crew. And I think that it probably, to me, feels like building the crew in the wrong way, although there may well be sort of a viable approach there. I just don't feel like it'd be more efficient than something else you could be bringing.
That makes sense. Are you finding yourself hiring a second master?
I'm not with Kaeris, and I think that's an Arcanist thing in general. I know Rezzers like to hire a lot of second masters. I think the way our masters are set up, I've yet to sort of see too many situations where I'd want a second. And the times I've done it, I've not been thrilled. Although it's something I want to play more with, and it's not something I've got a lot of experience with yet. But certainly when it's come up as an option, it's certainly something I'd probably back off on a little bit.
Yeah, I've yet to do it. And I don't know if that's just because I'm stuck in my ways and building crews from the last edition. Steve, who was on and talked about Molly, gave me kind of the first scenario where I think I would definitely try it because he talked about bringing McMorning in with Molly. But I'm dying to hear more people talk about this aspect of the game. Because it's something you and I talked about on our first podcast together. It's so brand new and potentially just changes everything. But I haven't heard it yet, right? I haven't heard anybody say that it's a whole new game because of this or it's broken because of this. So
I think that's it. And I'm tempted. I want to try it with a couple of the beta masters, sort of the try it with Ironsides or with Mei Feng a bit more. I think one of the challenges is you see a lot of second hiring going into either support a summoner with more aggression or to sort of add a summoner to a more aggressive crew, and the way that Sandeep's crew interlocks tends to mean that's not as efficient as I've experienced it. on the odd occasions I've tried, but I think it'll be something to see how it plays out.
Yeah, like you and I have mentioned in the first cast, it's going to take time. And it's going to take tournaments and some competitive play. And we now know that end of June, we're getting the full release. So I'll be anxious to come back at the beginning of 2020 and talk about it with you some more. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, I want to talk to James a little bit more about his approach when he knows what his opponent's faction is and when he sees the pool. So we'll talk about that on the other side of this break. Okay, so we've got a kind of an idea of how James's core crew works. Got a feeling of some of the other keyword models that he's going to be bringing in a good bit and what role they're going to play. Talked about a couple of versatile models as well as out of keyword models. So James, I want to kind of get into a little bit of your approach. So let's say that, first off, with a Kaeris crew, what do you think has more of an impact on your build? The opponent's faction or the pool? Or is it too many variables to be able to say one has a bigger impact than the other?
Certainly right now, I'm going to say the pool. And part of that is lack of experience. So, I've played... I've got to be getting close to 20 tournament games. So games in tournament conditions with live opponents rather than sort of practice games at local club. And that's still not enough. I'm still encountering masters for the first time every event. And so a little bit it is, I'm not tailoring as much to the faction because I'm still seeing what everyone else is capable of. And that may well change. But right now, predominantly aiming against the objective set.
That makes sense. So of the four strategies, Plant Explosives, Turf War, Corrupted Idols, and Reckoning, I want to talk about each of them. But I guess I'm curious to know, is one of those strategies one that screams Kaeris to you? So if that is the strategy it's going to be, it's going to kind of put her at front of the line?
She certainly likes Plant Explosives. Very mobile crew, and a crew that's very difficult to pin down, which means everyone's pretty much got a way out of melee without needing to disengage. So fast crew with the ability to use that speed to both hunt the enemy down and get markers down yourself. She really likes Plant Explosives. Yeah, and
I could see where your Fire Golem trick could really mess up as far as denial too, right? Keeping them on their side of the board. And is that a situation where Windgammon could be potentially making the list?
Yeah, you can use a Windgammon. So generally what I'm looking to do in Plant Explosives, I'm looking to get 3 bombs on individual models and 2 bombs on one. So generally Carlos will take 2 bombs. I tend not to put a bomb on Kaeris and then regret it every time. So because she always then winds up in a place to drop one. But you tend to wind up with 1 on a Windgammon, 1 on a Soulstone Miner, and then 1 on another model in the list. But everyone's fast enough that they sort of... I tend to like to try and get someone to kind of go deep for a couple of bombs so that they're kind of in that kind of, I'm so far back from the halfway line that it's prohibitively difficult for my opponent to get to these bombs. They can kind of drop those and go off and do something else. And then kind of have the other 3. So kind of have 2 bombs go deep on Carlos, and then the other 3 kind of skirmish in and aim to, or the Windgammon to go as well. And then kind of the other 2 bombs kind of lingering around as a bit more of either to lure my opponent into trying to intercept them, or to and sort of then have that fight, or in a more close in where I'm trying to deny my opponent at the halfway line.
Yeah, I have yet to play a Plant Explosives game, but it reads to me that the more time you can get them spending time on their side, the better off you are. How about Turf War? Do you like Kaeris and Turf War? And if so, what's your thoughts and approach?
Turf War is good. I mean, I think what you got to be very careful with is not getting into a slog around the markers with Kaeris. So what you tend to want to do is kind of break out fast, get probably the 2 markers, pick 2 markers closest to you, get those turned on quickly, and then move on. And what you're trying to do a lot of the time is hold the opponent up or delay the opponent from getting towards those markers. And you're trying to, a lot of the time with turf war, you're trying to evacuate your home quarter a lot of the time. Or, so you pick a quarter you turned on as kind of your home quarter and kind of evacuate from there so your opponent can't turn it off again then or claim it for themselves without because there's nothing, or easily because there's nothing in your quarter to kill. So if you're prepared to play that quite quick, be very conscious about which models are in which quarters to try and sort of get round and prevent. That tends to be how I go for it. And then you're aiming to use kills to just deny them quarters and kind of pick it up that way.
That actually makes me think of something I meant to ask you and I forgot, James. When you're forced to split your crew at deployment, is there anything in particular that someone should keep in mind with Kaeris, or anything that you have found effective, or is it really not a big factor?
You're fast enough that you can generally redeploy. What I tend to do when I split, I will tend to leave, the Golem, the Gamin, and Carlos are always going to wind up together, so they always wind up in the same pile. So generally, it's them, and then I kind of load balance it out. But it's fairly rare for me to go after I think the art of splitting a crew is still something that sort of I'm practicing, and I don't think I've got completely right. And often I think, it's not about splitting 50-50 model-wise. It's about what does my opponent worry about? Where is it? Where is my opponent going to worry about this model being? And often that's Kaeris, so I can kind of weight the other side away from Kaeris, so people will still want Kaeris down, but your crew is fast enough that it's not that big a deal.
You can even recover from a mistake if made there because of that speed, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons I like speed. I like speed in Malifaux generally as as an overall trait. Is it gives you more ground to cover. You don't have to make every single action count as much if you've got enough speed to kind of cover or kind of react to your opponent more efficiently. I'm a big fan of speed in Malifaux for that reason.
So how about Corrupted Idols? How does she do in there, and what is your approach?
So Idols is probably you've got the speed for Idols. What you don't have is the wounds. So Idols about two things: getting to markers and getting wounds down to sort of kick them across the line. This is where she starts to. I think she struggles a bit more. You can make good use of your pyres in Plan Explosive. You can also, in Idols, you can make good use of your pyres in Turf War because your opponent's going to be in a predictable place. But I think Idols is fine. You can play Idols, just bearing in mind any additional wounds you take are going to go on top of what is not the most tanky crew to begin with, right. And that's where you've got to be quite, you got to be quite cautious about going for that kind of 3 punt and going be a bit more cautious about where you're going for. But you've got the speed for it. You've absolutely got the speed for it, so it's not unmanageable by any stretch of the imagination.
And how about Reckoning?
So Reckoning is probably the one I'm coming around. For a crew that is quite quick and killy, I'm coming round to not liking Reckoning as much with Kaeris. You want to be in a position to be the aggressor, and you want to be distracting your opponent from something, so that you're sort of splitting their attention between them, trying to do their objectives while you're harassing them. When their objective is killing you, that's actually much more difficult. Right. And you do, from time to time, you can be quite a brittle crew. It's quite easy for things to get killed if your opponent's able to focus down on them. So it's one of those. I think I've just yet to figure out the right Reckoning list. But that's the one where I feel like Kaeris struggles the most.
So that's the strategies, James. I'm going to give you a scenario. So it's Nationals, and you're on the final table, of course, right? Round 5. And Plan Explosives is the strategy. What are the 2, 3, 4 schemes that would be in that pool that would just be the dream Kaeris pool? What are the schemes that she loves?
So she tends to like marker heavy scheme pools, both for you and for your opponent. So we'd like to see Breakthrough in there. We'd like to see Search the Ruins in there. Certainly. I'm more of a fan of Deliver the Message than most. You've got the movement to kind of get in, get the message delivered, and potentially chase down a master, and go from there. I think beyond that, there's, there's mileage in a number of them for her, but she generally wants that those marker heavy schemes. One of the things we didn't talk about going through Kaeris' cards herself, both Kaeris, the Golem, and Carlos have crow triggers on their ranged abilities that remove scheme markers in quite a decent pulse. So I've played against Colette crews that have struggled to keep markers on the board against Kaeris when she's able to focus on that.
Yeah.
So one of the things you're generally aiming to do, you need a marker heavy pool that gives you both the ability to deny and the ability to score. And so that's probably what I'd be aiming for.
Very cool. All right, we're going to take another break, and when we get back, we're going to give all of you non-Kaeris players a treat. We're going to talk about how do you counter a wildfire crew and what are some of the weaknesses. We'll be right back. Okay, James. Now, you and I have spoken before. I will never play Kaeris because I'll never play Arcanists, and I hate Arcanists. So when I see Kaeris on the other side of the table, what are some things that are going to help me? Can you give me a sense of what she's afraid of?
Yeah, so she's there's a range of things. So a lot of people immediately go for condition removal. Condition removal is one of those things where you've got to be careful how much you overinvest in condition removal. I see a lot of people overinvest in condition removal, and then that costs them because, as we've talked about, any model can assist another model in removing the conditions. It's about doing that efficiently. So one of my general aims is, you sort of don't worry too much about condition removal on your own stuff, but particularly anything that can strip burning off my models, so off the Kaeris players' models, is more useful. Particularly, if you can end the burning condition on the Golem, suddenly that becomes very killable. Mm-hmm. Suddenly it stood there with defense 5 and nothing else. So that's the kind of thing you'd like. If you can remove pyre markers in some way, they aren't destructible, but there are things that remove markers. Molly can do it, for example. Those are useful things. So that's what you want to do. And then, she's not a fan of stunned. There's a lot of triggers you really want to leverage, and a lot of free actions you want to leverage in the crew. So she doesn't like stunned either. But that's probably what I would aim for, and the way to go. And maybe if you can try and force her to stand and fight you, that's probably where you'll have a better day.
Is it worth your opponent taking the time to move on her, or how key is she to scoring and making the crew work?
I'm never overly concerned to lose Kaeris. I think she's, but it does shut down, a lot of threat and options. So you do have to be very careful losing Kaeris. And a big part of, Kaeris play is keeping her out of dodge. One of the interesting things with Kaeris is her only melee attack cannot attack or cannot target models with flight. So there are things you can do. So you drop a, even a relatively cheap model with flight into melee with her, then that makes it relatively difficult for her to then, she's then going to struggle to get out of dodge. Whereas her general melee attack actually moves the enemy off her, so it's not going for her to hit somebody, place them out of combat with her, and then run. Mm-hmm. So, it's not the most effective thing in the world, but where it comes up, it can be quite fun, or it can be quite tricky. I had a Zip player charge Zip into Kaeris the other day, which was quite funny because they both have the same melee attack, neither of which can target each other. So you sure you want to do that? Because it's not going to end well for either of us. I let him take that back then, and he decided to shoot at her instead. So, it's sort of, that's one you can leverage, but generally with her, it's a bit of a devil's choice trying to chase her down. If you've got something that can go for her. And certainly if you start putting her under pressure, she'll have to certainly think about where she is, because she doesn't generally like to be, if you can get into charging her, if you can get some shots off, she will go down. She is only defense 5, but bearing in mind that her built-in defensive trigger will also give you burning 1 each time. But you can certainly kill her if you're focusing on that.
Is there kind of a target priority someone should think about? I mean, we talked about, the Golem, being a bit of a sponge, but is there somebody in the crew that is a keystone that you would prefer if they didn't go in on?
I mean, I think it's about the right attacks to the right things. So the golem reduces a lot of damage, but if you can end his condition, it dies pretty easily. You can also, it's got 2 attacks. If you can give it slow, or you can distract it, you can take that out pretty effectively. Carlos has butterfly jump, and that is his primary defense. His primary defense is just getting out and away from things that are hitting him. So if you've got things with, I think it's Furious Charge, where you can charge more than once a turn, so you can sort of charge in, hit him, he'll disappear, he'll try and back off, and then you can charge in and hit him again. Those sorts of things. It's about picking the right. All the pieces are important. It's about picking the right weapon for each fight, and they're different for each of the different for each of the different threats in the crew.
That's fantastic, James. Well, that was good, man. I appreciate it. If I were to be lucky enough to talk you into coming on again, what's the next master you think you'd feel the most comfortable doing a deep dive on?
So I'm currently shopping around for my next master. I'm currently midway through painting Mei Fang. I think I have mostly painted Mei Fang. I also want to toy with Ironsides and Hoffman, as we talked about before. So I'm going to focus on one of those next. It's kind of looking like Mei Fang just because she's higher, she's further through the paint queue than a lot of the other options. So potentially Arcanist Mei Fang is next.
My buddy Ray has been playing a lot of the 10 Thunder Mei Fang, and he is a huge fan. So I'll be anxious to hear how she plays into Arcanist. That's good. Well, James, take care. It seems like you've got a tournament every weekend. You're a busy boy, so I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll catch you next time.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks for listening. Be sure to rate and write a review on this podcast so we can find more people almost as cool as you are. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for Third Floor Wars. That's THIRD. We'll catch you next time on the Third Floor.